everyone. Welcome back to another Bone Strong for Osteoporosis workout. I'm Holly Holland, and today we're going to get after the glutes. Why? Glutes are critical for bone health. They support the hips, which are among the most porous part of our bones. They're really important for posture, for balance, for back health. And so we're going to use these, what I call the dirty dozen, to help us focus on strengthening and stabilizing the glutes. In particular, we're going to be focusing on the glute maximus, one of the biggest muscles of your body, in your butt. Right above that, if you follow the ilium, right here, the main part of your pelvis, coming down and in, then you're going to be getting at your glute medius. Deeper to that is your glute minimus. And then along the side, I call it one of the helpers of the gluteals, that's the tensor fasciae lata. Primarily, these muscles are helping us with hip extension and hip rotation and abduction, all right? And you can tell that most of us don't do it very actively because we sit all day. So hip flexion and sitting like this is kind of the cancer of the glutes, I like to say. All right, so I've got a stable surface right here. I've got a resistance band that I'll use later, and I've got a chair for some of the stabilization. I might use a block later too. If you don't have these props, you're welcome to just use what you have and use a wall or something else too. Okay, let's start with one of the most effective positions for using your glutes, and that is bridging. So with bridging, we want to be on our backs. Our feet are parallel, hands down at the side. We're going to go through a lot of activation of the core muscles, which are essential too to getting into your glutes. Take an inhale. As you exhale, draw the abs in. You're going to pick the hips up, so you're bringing the hip into extension. Glute maximus is happy here, and one of the helpers of the glute maximus are the hamstrings. Right, I want to make sure that I'm not pressing on my neck, that I'm really up into my shoulders and supported that too. With all of our movements in the Bone Strong for Osteoporosis series, we're trying to really emphasize the whole body as a tool of resistance. So there's a difference between just doing something like moving yourself up like this and moving it with integrity, where you're pressing down into other parts of your body. We call those multifocal resistance points. So here I'm emphasizing my feet, my hands, even my spine into the shoulder. Now I could make that more challenging. I'm going to roll over and grab a band. I could use weights here. I could use anything that I could create more resistance as I'm pulling up and down. I'll just take that band across there, take a breath in, and then exhale, engage the abs and press up. So now I've got even more force to work with here. Definitely feeling that more intensely. And then lower down. So how many of these should you do? I like to think that, 8 to 10 is a reasonable guide for most of this, but if you do 4 one day and you can come back and do more the other, do what you can do. Build up. Don't try to go immediately to the most excessive range. Now, you could also work a little bit into some stabilization here, a little bit more stamina. So I could lower the butt an inch and press into my feet and lift that up. So working sometimes in that smaller range of motion with a little bit more pacing can also give you much more to work with. Definitely feeling that in that under butt, we call it. Okay, bridging. Let's talk about a side plank, a great exercise for working especially into the glute medius and the glute minimus. For side planking, you want to align your body here, and you can use your forearm for a little bit of a kickstool here, I like to say, kickstand right here with this hand. Let's talk about some modifications first. You could just activate this, lift up a little bit here. There's a nice side plank for you as well. You could take your top foot and press in here and push down. You're going to activate a little bit here too in the glute maximus when you do that. I don't love my hands forearm back that. It just doesn't feel good in my shoulders, so I like to come up on my wrists. So I'll take that modification here, press in, lift up, feel that bottom leg really active here, and I'm working that top leg as well. And a more full position here would be to stack your feet stretch up and lift. It's a lot for many people, I realize that, so take modifications as you need to. As we go to the other side, I'll show you some more you can do with that. You could take a chair, use that for both resistance and stabilization, either again with your forearm down or with your wrist down. This feels fantastic, actually. I really love this version. I'm feeling it all over the body, and I can really feel like I can hold this for a while. I could also dip the hip and press back up. So that's a marvelous way to really feel that load, that meaningful load into your bones. Okay, spinal balance. Again, feel free to bring something down under your knees that you might need. Spinal balance is fantastic here because it's going to really take your hip into extension, which is the primary activation of the glute maximus. At the same time, the leg that's not moving is working strongly from the glute medius and the glute minimus side. So I want to make sure that as I'm stretching that back with the moving leg, that I'm not sagging into this outer hip. I'm activating it, pressing up with that leg here, and then I could take the other arm forward. But since we're working primarily with glutes, you could keep your hands right here, work that stabilization, and just try to focus on getting that hip into extension. You'll notice that my foot is in flexion. That's done for a reason here because that's going to light up the posterior chain of your body, which is where the glutes are primarily located. Okay, we can try the other side. I want to stabilize. I'm not working really quickly here because I really want to emphasize control. Reaching that almost like I could balance a tray of drinks on the back side, and then stretch that opposite hand forward. That feels pretty amazing. Kind of love it. Okay, a variation of this would be to do donkey kick or sort of a side position for this. So I'm going to go back and now stabilize on my right side, and I could lift this hip into extension. That feels great just in that bent position. Then I'm going to turn it out. Now make sure that as you're doing that, you're not torquing your pelvis. You're stabilizing that and square that up. My hand is here just to emphasize. I know that I tend to arch my back a little bit, and I want to make sure that I'm not doing that. Okay, try the other side. Make sure you're not sagging onto the stable side. Pulling the abdominals up and in each time before you lift the moving leg. Whew, feel that intensely. Okay, you could do clamshells. So I'll just lie down on the side here. I want to make sure that my pelvis is neutral. So here's the pelvis. I want to lengthen that and then feel that stretch, lining the heels up with my sit bones. I have a tendency, as I mentioned, to arch my back, so trying to avoid that. So as I squeeze the heels together, I'm getting a real good warm up. I can feel that a lot into the hip rotators. They're helpers of the glutes, but I'm definitely lighting up all the other glutes too. Glute maximus, which is in external rotation as well. Glute medius, minimus in that side position. I could extend the leg out, so that's taking it into some hip extension, bring it back in and close. Squeeze up, press out, draw together and close. And remember, you're creating your body as a tool of resistance. So don't just blah and push it out. Press, extend, stretch, and work back in. Okay, you want to make that really work for you. Come to the other side, line it up again. Can see this from a couple of different angles. Heels together and squeeze and up. If you do this well, you'll feel it right from the beginning. It doesn't take much. I think this is one of my most favorite positions, just movements throughout the day that I do because it feels so good. It counter affects the sitting that we do so much throughout our days. And just do a couple more here just to equalize across those two sides and back. Now finally, let's come into some prone positions. So this is a version of a yoga pose called locust, which is working your body into extension. You could do a number of things with your upper body. I'm just going to take my hands down by the side, and you would have your forehead down to start with. I'm just not going to do that or you won't be able to hear me. Level out your pelvis here. So I'm going to press the tops of my thighs down, pull my abs up and in. Take my hands back there. I'm not really concerned with them. And I'm just going to try to lift this right leg out and then up. It's very small. I don't want to arch my back, feel any discomfort there, but definitely feeling that into the glute maximus especially. And then lower down. Set it up, thighs down, belly up to protect your low back. Other leg lifts. Ooh, this is such a good exercise. Every time I do this, I'm realizing how effective this is. I could take my upper body with me, of course, because that feels amazing to kind of counter effect that flexion for the upper spine, which is one of the scourges of osteoporosis. I could take both legs out a little bit, stretching here. If I wanted to rest my upper body like this, I could do that. Bring the heels together here. That's going to work a lot into the hip extension and press out. Inhale in, thighs down, belly up, and press that out. Make sure I'm stretching under my control. Ooh, that lights up everything in the back of my hip. So some good floor work that you can do. And now let's do some standing work because we know that weight bearing is so important for osteoporosis. Let's do one of the best exercises you can do for glutes, and that's squatting. Okay. Now, I tend to think people do too big of a squat and they overplay their knees. We want to think this as an extension of our hip hinge. Small bend of the knee, abs in, hips back. It's a right angle, basically. So if I'm getting that back, my hips are square here, that's an effective move. I don't have to get that close to the floor. Pressing the feet, thighs down, belly up, and hinge and back. I could add some arm movements, which I think are kind of effective so that you don't really fall back into this position. But don't get into the excuse of continuing to push into your knees. That's not helpful. That's not working your glutes. Small bend of the knee, abs in, butt back. Work the back. You're trying to think about the sitting bones, the stretch back in through here. All right, now you could add some side squats to that position. And how about side squats with resistance? Even better. I'll take a band. I'm going to move it across my thighs. Make sure it's nice and tight. And not so tight that you choke the air out of here. Alrighty. Bring it in here. Cross it over. All right. Sitting back into my squat, and then I'm going to step it to the side and back. So I'm working a lot of stabilization as well as mobilization of the gluteals. And this is so functional, helping you get up and down from the floor, being able to climb stairs. That's why I really like squats and glute work here, because it's so helpful to everyday movements. Okay, I'm feeling that big time on both the glute medius and the glute maximus. So the next thing we're going to be doing are some lunges and some walking lunges, I'll call them. I'm going to bring my chair out for that. Use it as a little stabilization. You could use a wall, of course. I'm going to step my outside foot back, and I'm lunging with the front leg, and I'm really wanting to work at right angles again. So not arching or pushing off on the front knee. The work is in the glutes and the thighs here. So I'm dragging my butt under and lowering that down to my point of control. Don't have to use this. It's kind of nice though, just to focus on your balance, up and down. Love the way this is really activating both sides in the glutes. Here, and then step forward. Okay, I'm going to take the opposite position with the chair for this movement. Okay, so I think I had the outside leg back. Yes, okay. So I'm going to take this here and dip it down. Now, what's a walking lunge is that I'm going to take it back here, and then as if I'm walking forward, I'm going to hinge forward into hip extension. Those of you who do yoga, you'll recognize this as a form of warrior 3. Wonderful position, and it's helping me balance, by having to do each of those things. Balance and then extend. Remember that the leg that's being stable is working on the glute medius side. The lifting leg is working into glute maximus in hip extension. Okay, and you could do that exercise by itself, either with your hands to the wall or to the chair. Take the leg into extension. Think of that as another pose that's very much like our hip hinge, and trying to not let your lower body round or upper body round as you're doing that. You'd want to do it on both sides. Of course, you could do this without the assistance of a chair, but I find that it's helpful. And some days your balance is just a little bit more challenged, so why not use it if you have it? Okay, some standing positions that we can do. Tree pose from yoga. So when I'm bringing my leg either into the inside of my shin or up onto my inner thigh here, I'm working strongly in that inside leg to stabilize along the glute medius, the glute minimus, and then this leg is working both hip rotation and a little bit of hip extension. So I could take that here, work on that deep balance, holding hands one-to-one here and standing tall, or I could use a chair for resistance as well. Okay, we know this from our previous work too. You could take this chair position like we've done as well and just work on this side. But you're going to get a little bit in the glute maximus here and pressing in, and we could do our chair version like that with balance coming up and down. This is how I tend to do it with my Yoga for Osteoporosis classes. And then finally, any of the warrior poses from yoga are fantastic for this. Warrior one, where you're stepping forward, press back here, getting a lot of stabilization on the glute medius side, a lot of activation in the glute maximus side here. Remember, so many variations you can do with your arms, reaching up for a little bit of back extension. Show that on the other side, what that looks like from the side. And the chair can be used here as well. It's a nice little prop. If you need that for support, you take that, because we're really focusing on the glutes here. So what you do with the arms doesn't really matter so much. You're working that groundedness, turning on the back of the hip. For warrior two, same thing. I'm gonna come to the side for this, turn out with my right leg in this case, internally rotate my left leg. Now, see that my pelvis kind of just follows the lead of the hips here. I didn't want to torque my pelvis. And I'm just going to work on hip opening. It's not about pushing off on that front knee. I want to line my spine with my pelvis. And then I'll stretch the arms out here. Really work into that stretch. A lot of stamina there. I could take it to reverse warrior. So any of these standing postures are going to be so good for working your glutes. Let's change, just kind of pivot around. Try to align your heels in the same line. External rotation with the front leg, internal rotation with the back leg. Hold your neutral spine, reach the arms out. This time I'm going to take my palms up because that feels really nice. To my shoulders, stretching out. And breathe. And then take it to a little reverse warrior. And that feels amazing. And we're done. Okay, so to the dirty dozen for your glutes. So try a few or all of those and really get after your glutes, because you're going to do so much to help your bones. Thanks for joining me today. I'll see you next time.